everybody doing this afternoon? I came over from hot Atlanta, but New Orleans got Atlanta beat for sure. It's hot up in here. But amazing. I'm like, yes, Essence. I used to do Essence every year, all the things. Convention Center, every pop-up, and now I'm like, where are we talking about political power? Let's have that conversation. So I'm so excited for those of you who are taking time out of your Essence excursion weekend to come and have a conversation with us about building Black women's political power. Before I get going, I'm going to bring up my sister girl, Alicia Garza, and I know we have another special guest who they're going to put up on the stage in a second, on the camera. Here, come on up, Alicia. As Joy said, my name is Tracy Sturdivant, and I am the CEO and the president of the League. We are a social impact organization really working at the intersection of pop culture and politics. The League is honored to be driving the social impact campaign for the film that we're going to discuss today, The Rebellious Life of Mrs. Rosa Parks. Joining us for the conversation about political power of Black organizers is my dear girlfriend, Alicia Garza. Alicia is a multi-hyphenated everything. She is an author, a political strategist, and freedom dreamer. Alicia founded the Black Futures Lab to make Black communities powerful in politics. She is the co-creator of Black Lives Matter and the Black Lives Matter Global Network. I'm gonna need you to give it up for that. And the strategist and partnerships director for the National Domestic Workers Alliance and the co-founder of Supermajoria. Alicia has launched the Black Census Project, which she's gonna talk about in our discussion. I'm also thrilled to welcome virtually Soledad O'Brien. Soledad is an award-winning documentarian, journalist, speaker, author, and philanthropist. She is the CEO of Soledad O'Brien Productions, SOB Productions, and a multi-platform media production company dedicated to telling empowering and authentic stories on a range of social issues, and a thought leader whose public engagement garners wide attention. I like to call her the mayor of Twitter. Let's welcome our guest today. Got a little delay. She got a little tickled by that. Let's welcome our guest today. So before we jump in, that's applause, thank you. So before we jump in, I just want to say how good it feels to be here in person with everyone. I know that the pandemic is still raging, that COVID is still an issue in our communities, but it is a joy, as we talk about Black joy, to be able to gather with so many beautiful women and men today here at Essence. So before we get into that, I really just want to take an opportunity to ask you all, Alicia, like, what does it mean to you to be able to gather in community with folks right now?
Well, first of all, hi. Okay, let's try again. Hi. Okay, I've been so excited about this. So, I think what it means right now for us to gather in person is that we still need to be careful. We still need to mask up and do all those things. But we're like social beings. Yes. And we need to be connected to each other. And I am thinking a lot about 2020 and the big kind of push that we had to make. And a lot of that had to be online because, the virus was moving all over the place and we didn't really know that much about it. And there was no vaccine. So we were really trying to figure it out. And people were still out there knocking doors and talking to folks because that's what we do. But ultimately, I think what it means to me is that I get to actually be connected. And as human beings, I think we need that level of connection and in-person time. And it also means that it's like super awkward to be in person.
I'm still like, do I hug? Do we?
I'm trying to like figure out how to talk to people. I'm being weird, I'm like, hi, I'm working it out. So if I'm weird to you, don't take it personal. It's me. It's not you.
So true. I'm like, how does one do this again?
Correct.
So Soledad, we wish you could be here in person, but have you been able to move out in the world a little bit more?
Yeah, a little bit of travel. We've been shooting a lot of docs, so we've never really ever stopped hopping on airplanes.
Yeah.
And I look like a crazy person now because I'm double masked with a hoodie and a thing, and I don't mind. I don't care. I'm going to keep traveling that way until someone says I should stop. But yeah, I'm very jealous, of course, because Essence is always amazing. And even though New Orleans is hot, it's hot in New York as well. And I miss all you guys in person. But we don't have to have that awkward hug, shake, kiss, don't kiss, step back thing.
For sure, for sure. Well, there'll definitely be more opportunities to awkward with you. Let's talk about this film, Soledad. We have the opportunity to share with you exclusive clips from the upcoming film, The Rebellious Life of Mrs. Rosa Parks. Produced by Soledad O'Brien Productions, The Rebellious Life of Mrs. Rosa Parks, based on a book by Jean Theo Harris, uncovers the real Rosa Parks, y'all. Not the soft-spoken seamstress, but the determined, powerful, radical activist who dedicated her entire life to fighting for justice. So with a wealth of footage and access to key accounts of Mrs. Parks's true impact, this documentary confronts the watered-down caricature of the mother of the civil rights movement and finally sets the record straight. By painting an honest and evocative picture of Mrs. Parks's defiant spirit and the countless hardships she faced fighting for liberation, the film shines a light on how the movement today continues her legacy, as well as the legacies of countless other Black women organizers in the long path towards justice. Let's take a look. She was seen as the problem. Well, I don't know about you, but that doesn't seem like a tired seamstress to me. And I really encourage folks to take a look at this film as someone who considers themselves a student of the movement and history. There were so many things that I learned about Rosa Parks in this film. I was like, what? Really? Oh my goodness. I'm also a Detroiter, so just very proud that she made Detroit her home in her final days. So it has become cliche to say that we're living in unprecedented times, but we are at a troubling crossroads. I think everyone can agree with that. For the first time, the power of the courts is being used to take away rights rather than expand them. And before we get into this conversation about recent decisions about the Supreme Court, and trust me, we will get into that conversation, I want to take folks back to another SCOTUS decision. On February 27, 2013, President Barack Obama and congressional leaders from both sides of the aisle gathered to pay tribute to the legacy of Rosa Parks. A 9-foot bronze statue of Mrs. Parks was unveiled at the U.S. Capitol. The first full-size statue of a Black person in Statuary Hall. She is portrayed seated, clutching her purse, cast in her historic bus stand. I see Congresswoman Nikema Williams here. She probably sees that, that bust often. And as the distinguished speakers in the hall gave their tributes to Mrs. Parks again and again, they praised the solitary act of a quiet woman rather than an ongoing collective struggle. The ceremony reiterated troubling stereotypes about Mrs. Parks, and at that time, Nancy Pelosi said she did what was natural. She was tired, so she sat down. Across town that very same day, the Supreme Court was hearing arguments in Shelby County versus Holder, which challenged key sections of the Voting Rights Act. And as we know, the Supreme Court ultimately gutted the Voting Rights Act, stating in its decision that the sections in question are based on, quote, 40-year-old facts having no logical relation to present day, and thus unconstitutional. So Rosa Parks was given this tribute at the same time that the Supreme Court was poised to unravel what she and others in the civil rights movement fought for. We got a statue while they made it easier to strip away our voting rights. So, Soledad, I was really struck by this anecdote from the film, and it seems to illustrate how those in power are both willing to water down Rosa Parks' legacy while also unraveling all that she worked for. What inspired you to tell her story?
First, I thought the book by Jean Theo-Harris was amazing. And when our two directors, Johanna Hamilton and Yoruba Richin, came to me with this idea, it just sounded like there were so many remarkable things about a woman that I would have told you I kind of knew her story. And there were so many moments. I mean, a moment ago in that clip, right? She's talking about, you'll have to kill me first. Right. That's not how Rosa Parks is ever quoted, ever. Right. And so we knew there was much more to tell, but we also wanted to explore exactly what you're going for, which is why in the civil rights movement do we see at least two things happening? Number one, a lot of these fighters are kind of portrayed as accidental actors. Just one day, it just so happens her feet hurts and she just, decides that she's just tired, when we know actually that Rosa Parks has been working in a very hardcore way for civil rights since the 1930s. And then number two, I think there's this sense that, and the media does this a lot, right? Like the story of one person acting alone in a moment, and right. Here we build a statue or we give an award, as opposed to this idea of like, where is she in the arc of a whole bunch of people who've been working for an issue? And I think those are two big flaws in the mythologies around history that we really wanted to correct.
Yes, I really, really appreciated how you all leaned into that point. Alicia, I know, you took part in the film. What lessons do you think current political organizers can learn from Rosa Parks? And what makes her story so relevant today?
Well, it was a real honor to work with Soledad and her team. And I was really excited that this film was being made, because it's also something I talk about in my book, right? We tell fairy tales about movements, and therefore we have uneven and unrealistic expectations about how change happens and who can make change, who can be a part of change, who can be a change maker, and who gets to activate their superpowers. And with Rosa Parks, right, we have this story not only that she was pushed into action because she was tired, which is almost like a contradiction in and of itself, right? When you're tired, you're not doing nothing.
At all.
That's just a fact. But then there's this other piece of it, right, where we erase the fact that she was rooted in community and had been organizing for a very long time. Right. She becomes a part of this case around segregation, right? Because she had been deeply rooted in community, helping to register people to vote when it was literally criminalized, right? I'm talking to people about how to get involved, encouraging people to fight back when there was crimes being committed in our communities by the people who were supposed to protect and serve us. But if we keep telling these narratives that there's a superhero that kind of falls from the sky at exactly the right time to do exactly the right thing, then that means that each and every one of us gets to sit back and do nothing. And it also means, right, that when we take part in an action, we take part in a protest, we take part in a march, and then the change that we seek doesn't happen, we go, oh, well, then the movement has failed. It's failed. And y'all have heard this before, right? I keep hearing from people, what is your movement doing about this? I'm like, it's not my movement, it's our movement. It doesn't move unless we are all in motion, right? So I just think that we have to keep being diligent about looking at Rosa Parks' story as a way to understand the long arc of change, as a way to understand what it takes to activate people, what it takes to be grounded, right, in long-term struggle around problems that have persisted for a long time. But I also think we can take from her story how to still be hopeful and how to still keep persisting even when sometimes there's steps forward and sometimes there's steps back. And that's why I'm so grateful for this documentary.
I really appreciate your perspective on movements and how they need to move. I do want to come back to this conversation around Black women and the narratives of superheroes.
You want to go there?
Well, we'll see. We got some time. We can go there.
All right,
that might be an after dark with a cocktail conversation.
I was like, let me know, 'cause,
Soledad, what do you think people who watch the film will be most surprised to learn about?
I think they're going to really hear the voice of Rosa Parks and really understand the degree to which she was just a badass. Like, I don't know how else to put it. I mean, she wasn't a tired seamstress who one day was, tired into action. She was just, and had been for a very long time, working very hard in the Black struggle. I mean, imagine going 100 miles to interview people as they're being surrounded by police. Like, what a terrifying thing for the woman who's a victim, but also the idea that, Mrs. Rosa Parks would just put herself in the middle of that. She was the one, as she said, right, who they would call her. And she said if they would have the courage to give her a statement, she would have the courage to come and get that statement. And so I think people don't understand, because that narrative that we have about Rosa Parks, I mean, years ago, my kids were very little, probably in like kindergarten, they were learning the story of Rosa Parks. And of course, it was completely messed up. So they'd say, Rosa Parks, she wouldn't get on the bus. I'm like, no, you haven't. No, completely.
You're like, it's already wrong, but like, oh no.
But we learn these little nuggets, and people don't realize, after Rosa Parks' incredible bravery, she then lost her job. She was then drummed out of her community. Like, all these terrible things happen. And when you tell people, like, here's what happened to Rosa Parks after that moment, they don't know, because we tell the story, Rosa refused to give up her seat. She was a tired seamstress, the end. And there's so much more to her life story.
Right, like one of the things that was so shocking to me is the first time that she had ever had health care, right, was when she was working in John Conyers' office as an aide. I'm like, what? Like, the first time, and this is late in life. And so the way that we care for folks who are doing movement work, especially Black women, we expect them to toil and work so hard and not get anything for their contributions. Whole other conversation over drinks. Again, we stay on script. So, one of the most divisive political maneuvers that we've seen lately is bad faith actors using critical race theory, or CRT, you just mentioned schools, CRT, to ban certain books and curriculums. I mean, they banning books in 2022, y'all. Like, what is happening out here? What do you think is driving that movement, and what are their ultimate goals?
I think the ultimate goal is to sort of fight a fight that is happening around social issues. And we have known for a very long time that people are happy to vote against their self-interest if they think in any way, shape, or form that people of color will somehow benefit. You can make people extremely mad if you say to them, hey, someone is learning about this issue. I was reading today that a book about the Japanese internment has been banned. I think it's in the state of maybe Florida. But, a thing that happened, they're banning the book. I mean, it's really absolutely ridiculous, but I think it's this framing of an issue, not around the facts, but taking those things that are emotional trigger points for people who are deeply embedded in racism. And also, I think sometimes the media frames it as economic anxiety, which I think is bull. And will really, it's a good way to get people mad and get them around an issue that actually works against their own self-interest, because they're mad about the racial part of it because they're deeply embedded in racism. And I think that's a really, really big part of it.
Right. One of the things I think is also interesting about this film and the power, the opportunity that it has, is that they always like to point to folks like Rosa Parks. Well, you should protest like she did. They're like, when in fact it's like, okay, well, Exhibit A, let's talk about how she protests and the opportunities to really educate people about that. So let's turn to the Supreme Court. While there were a number of decisions that threatened to undermine our safety and democracy, I want to talk about one that's on everyone's mind, and that is the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. I want to get both of your reactions to that decision. Alicia, I'll start with you.
Well, I have a lot of reactions and opinions, but the thing that I've been spending a lot of time thinking about is what it's going to take to turn up the heat. What's happening at the Supreme Court is a complete travesty. It is also the culmination of 30 years of organizing, voting, picking a target and being relentless in terms of your messaging and your organizing and making sure that people have adopted your ideology.
That's right.
And so all of the talking points that we hear for and against, right, that is all the result of a movement that has been relentless and dedicated and was successful in this case. So it also just makes me feel like we should be voting over and over and over again. We should be relentless in the pursuit of our freedoms. And November is coming.
Yeah.
So I feel that way. I feel like November is coming. I feel like we need to look at what's happening in states and cities across the nation, and whoever purports to represent us, we need to push them on where they stand around making sure we have access to resources for reproductive care, including abortion.
Right.
And whoever is not with us should be having to find another job in November. That's how I'm feeling about
I know.
it.
I'm like, you want to talk about states' rights? Let's go
Let's
talk
go.
about. Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Soledad, what are your thoughts on the latest decision?
Yeah. Listen, I fully agree, and I think there's more that's coming down the pike, right? We know not just Roe v. Wade. We know, what's been decided about the environment. The EPA is potentially devastating. We know, I think, highly likely that cases about privacy are going to be things that are reevaluated. Cases that deal with gay marriage are going to be reevaluated. I don't know. You could theoretically go back and look at the Loving decision and say, well, we're revisiting this as well. So it's a very scary time. But I do hope that people move out of the scariness of the time and move into being very vocal about the things that are important to them. This is the moment to be vocal and not just curl up into a ball. A bit of framing in Washington Post is a good example today that frames democracy as like, the people who want democracy as if there's a small subset, as opposed to like, no, we all should want democracy. Wanting democracy is actually not some kind of a bias. It's actually what we are built on and what we should all deserve and how the framing of these stories should be. So I spend a lot of my time calling out things that I think are just egregiously wrong and badly framed because they're not serving their audience and serving their readers, or in some cases their viewers. That's what I try to do. And I think everybody needs to figure out how they're going to contribute. There are so many moments in this documentary where if Rosa Parks had said, I'm out, this is overwhelming, I'm getting no help, I can't do it anymore, we all would have looked at her history and been like, we get it, totally makes sense. And so what I try to learn from historical figures is like, what made them not quit? What makes them go back? What makes them, in spite of it being absolutely impossible, what makes them continue on? Because that's sort of where I think I find my strength.
I love that. Alicia, I know that you are in the midst of a fight. Talk to us a little bit about the work you're doing with the Black Census.
Well, we're so honored to partner with Higher Heights and more than 50 Black-led grassroots organizations across the country to push the Black Census, where we're talking to 200,000 Black people from every demographic, every region, about what it is that we deal with every day and what it is that we want to see done about it, what we want our government to do about it. You can take the Black Census here. It's Black Women Count. Please take it. It's like 10 minutes. And what we do with that information is we turn it into a legislative agenda that we move in cities and states. So please join us. We're, again, so happy to partner with y'all on this. And then I'm also getting to work with Soledad on trying to create more space for political conversation with a little bit of pop culture, taking the podcast, Lady Don't Take No, to television.
Tell them about your podcast. Tell them about the podcast.
The podcast is really,
so good.
It's so fun. It's really geared towards folks who are tired of CNN and MSNBC and the droning on and on of the stories over and over. You get the digest of what's happening in politics and pop culture, and you get to talk to people that are doing amazing things in the world and inspiring us every single day. So that's what it's for and about. And then sometimes we also give like dating in your 40s tips, but you just have to tune in to get that little
like,
ladies love notes.
I'm like, we can talk about parenting in your 40s. Woo, child. It's like late bloomer. Soledad, what are you working on right now that you think folks will be excited to hear about?
Well, I'm gonna get to be the executive producer of Alicia's show, her TV show, because we love her podcast so much. So really, really thrilled about that. And then we're always got a bunch of docs. I mean, our philosophy for our production company is really to elevate untold stories, stories that deserve to have a second or third look and dig into, what's really behind them. And so we've been very fortunate. We really, I think once you start working on projects and people see what you're doing, and then they start bringing you projects because they know you can bring them to the fore. So yeah, we're crazy busy, but all in a really good way.
Well, there was no one better to carry this story and tell this story than you and your team. So just really appreciative and excited to be working with you all on getting it out in the world. And thank you to Higher Heights for giving us an opportunity to talk to you all a little about this. I want to also give a shout out to Ashley Witter, who's here, who's also in the film, who runs the Highlander Center. A lot of amazing, dynamic Black women who are leading in this moment that show up in the film. So it will be streaming on Peacock soon. Really want to encourage folks to take a look at our site, therealrosaparks.org, to learn more about the film, when it will be streaming on Peacock, and how you can schedule a streaming or being involved in the Impact campaign. Thanks so much.